What is happening, guys? It is Thursday afternoon, which means it's time for a little bit of a Reignmakers breakdown here. And if you guys could be so kind as you come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And this show, if you guys have any questions for me at all, throw them into the YouTube chat and I can answer them. And it could be about anything, really, whether it's about bets for tonight, specifically about Thursday Night Football Reignmakers, if we look ahead to Sunday's main slate, whatever it is that's on your guys' mind you might want to ask me about, chat is free. So go ahead and if you want to do that, you could. The only thing that I really would like you guys to do is, like I said at the top, just like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to start by talking about Thursday Night Football, looking ahead to some of the top options to get to in Reignmakers, and we'll find out who we want to play in that multiplier spot. We've got the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Seattle Seahawks, which not a terrible game, right? Pretty decent on paper. Is there a chance that the Cowboys win via blowout? Sure. But I think this game should be fairly competitive, and we'll look at some of the top options to get to in tonight's game, as well as the floor prices of the players, which will help us identify some of the players we might want to go out and buy on the secondary market. So here we go. Got this sorted by Thursday Night Football now. All the Thursday night players. We'll sort here by projection to see who it is that is projecting the best for us, which, listen, no surprises here. CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, and then we've got the Seattle players coming in after that. And by the way, right now, we've got a question in the YouTube chat here. This is from great call on Ingles last night for NBA. Sharp call. That is from I'm a loser till I win the milli. And so I'm going to guess that you didn't win the $1 million last week in the Reignmakers Thanksgiving. I didn't either. I didn't win $1 million last week, but had some good lineups, made some money on the big Thursday Thanksgiving Reignmakers slate. And one thing that helped me, if you guys watched the show that I did last week, was getting some of the cheap Christian Watson cards and plugging them into lineups. Christian Watson, we found cards of him on the show last week. Floor price was only $7, and he had, I'm pretty sure it was his best fantasy game of the season. Either way, he was massively valuable, especially relative to his price point, and helped me secure some cashes. And for a $7 price point, when the min cash was, what was it last week, $150, $200, somebody was definitely really valuable to helping me fill out some lineups last week. But yeah, thanks for the shout out from I'm a loser till I win a milli in the YouTube channel there. So let's go ahead and look, because listen, I can tell you guys to just do this as the most obvious build. Like here's the super chalk build for showdowns. And we don't have to worry about superstars, right? CeeDee Lamb, not a superstar, was the start of the year. And even if he was, it wouldn't really matter because there would only be one superstar in tonight's game anyway. But we've got David Lynch has left us a question in the YouTube chat who says that he has most of the studs for tonight's game. How do you go about deciding whether to play them in the showdown versus stacking them in deep roster? Yeah, so one thing that I would go ahead and look at right now is what is the difference in the prize pools, right? So I'm going to pull this up on my phone right here. And you say you've already got the studs. All right, so what are the prize pools? For the Thursday night single game, we have a prize pool. And then also, David, do you have the core cards for them? Do you have the rares? Because if you go ahead and you look, the core cards, it is a $5,000 prize pool, $500 to first. The rare is a $15,000 prize pool, $2,000 to first. But something else I like to look at is what is the value, mostly core. All right, so what is the value of each lineup? So here's the way that I go ahead and do that. We have $3,500 entries. 3,500 entries in a $5,000 contest for the core Thursday Night Football contest, which means what? The value of each lineup is about $1.50 for tonight. Now let's look at the deep roster. Deep roster is pretty similar, but there are already 500 entries in it. If you have the cards, it does look like the showdown is going to be a little bit more valuable to you because we have about 500 less entries in it in a contest that has the exact same prize pool. So you're competing with less people, but then also it seems like you already kind of have the nuts for that. Whereas assuming you don't have all the nuts for the deep slate contest, right? Like probably don't have like all the best running backs, all the best wide receivers. So I think it's in your best interest to play. It's not going to be the same answer for each individual week, but for this situation, and then also how many entries there are in those contests right now, I think the better one for you to play in is going to be that showdown contest. And now we'll go ahead and we'll look at how we could build some lineups and how we could differentiate them. And I know one thing that I did, because I still have some of my holiday cards from both Dallas and Seattle players is just to be different. I personally made some stacks of the Seahawks side of the game. The players are cheaper and it's going to be different looking lineups. If you just want to play like the optimal, right? What is the optimal lineup in Showdown tonight for Reignmakers? Pretty easy. CeeDee Lamb in the captain spot, Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, and Geno Smith in the utility spots. That projects so much better than any other possible lineup. Here's the problem, though. What percentage of the field is going to be playing that? A lot. You're going to be duped with a lot of people. Then it comes down to the serial numbers, and it just gets to be a pretty tricky situation. So it's not to say that isn't a good lineup, but it's just going to be really hard to win with it. So that's where I really want to try to figure out, like, okay, what could I do in the Showdown contest to make my lineups look a little bit different for Reignmakers? And to me, it's going to be that Seattle side of the game. And then on the other end, so the first lineup I built, it has Tony Pollard in the captain spot. So we're looking at a game here where the game script is, okay, Dallas wins, and their touchdowns come from Tony Pollard in the running game. And then the utility spot, I have Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, and Charbonnet. So that is the lineup, the first lineup that I built for a rare contest for tonight. The reasoning now is, number one, I think it's going to be a little bit contrarian, but I like the story that lineup tells and what the game script is going to be. Mentioned it before, right? Dallas wins. They build up a good lead. The touchdowns come from Tony Pollard. And then we've got Seattle throwing the ball to keep up. And that's where I'm hoping, it's Geno Smith throwing touchdown passes to DK Metcalf. And then also we saw Zach Charbonnet as somebody who could really get involved in the passing game as well. If we pull up his numbers for a game script that could potentially be similar to this Thursday night's game as it was to last Thursday's game on Thanksgiving, where they lost in a pretty one-sided game to the 49ers. Let's go ahead and look at the workload for Charbonnet, who, by the way, had a fairly shitty DFS game, but there were some promising signs, most notably the workload. He got 14 carries. He was targeted 4 times in the passing game. And now in the last 3 games from Charbonnet, we've seen 4 targets, 6 targets, and 5 targets. And some of those games were with at least partially Kenneth Walker out there. Last week, again, or 2 weeks ago against the Rams, Walker was there at least to start the game. The week before, Walker was also in, but still, we were able to get 5 targets out of Zach Charbonnet. So if this is a game where the Seahawks are trailing, which I think, we all think is somewhat likely, actually not somewhat likely, very likely, Charbonnet is probably going to be getting himself 5, 6, 7 targets. So that's where I think he correlates pretty well with Geno Smith. And that's what I like doing to be contrarian is you go to Tony Pollard in the MVP spot, and then you go to the Seahawks passing games in the utility spots. And it also makes sense if you look at some of the core floor prices and how much cheaper it is to build lineups that way. CeeDee Lamb's core floor price is $7.25. Dak Prescott, $7.10. Tony Pollard only $3.50. So once you get past the 2, real fantasy studs in the game, which I understand why people are paying more for these guys, look at their projection relative to everybody else. 22.28 for CeeDee Lamb in our projections, 21.73 for Prescott, and then you get a really big drop-off before you get to the 17.89 for Tony Pollard. But the issue becomes if everybody's playing those same guys, you're competing with so many people. And now we've also gotten to a point in the season where, there's more prints of the individual players. They're more readily available. It's one of the reasons that the floor prices are also cheaper than they were earlier in the year. So it's going to be lineups that if you guys want to play Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, good lineup for sure. Just going to be really hard to differentiate yourself. So that's what I did to be a little bit off the board. Tony Pollard, core floor price, $3.50. Geno Smith is only $2. DK Metcalf, $1.49. He's that cheap. You could get a Zach Charbonnet for less than $1. You could also get to Tyler Lockett for less than $1. And when we go ahead and we said, sure, those Cowboys guys are more likely to be optimal than the Seahawks players, but when DK Metcalf costs $1.49, when Zach Charbonnet costs 98 cents, then you have to ask yourself, like, okay, these players are more likely to be optimal, but are they 7 times more likely to be optimal than the Seahawks players? That's where I say no, and that's where we're really bringing some game theory into this and getting some value on those secondary market prices. Let's see what we have from I'm a loser till I win a milli. Another question from him here in the YouTube chat where he's bringing up the Cardinals waive Zach Ertz. McBride season, he asked to be cut is crazy. I don't really think it's that crazy. Think about where Zach Ertz is in his career. Old, washed. Yeah, a little bit left in the tank, but clearly not the player he once was. But this Cardinals team is going nowhere, and Zach Ertz is a player who, how many years has Zach Ertz been in the NFL? And what's his age? He's like 35, right? Zach Ertz? In football years, by the way, once you're in your mid-30s, like that's the equivalent of like 70 in human years. It's like how dogs age. So Zach Ertz is, and Zach Ertz also has an incredibly long injury history. Yeah, so Zach Ertz is 33. Fuck, he's the same age as me. I'm calling Zach Ertz old and washed when he's not the same age as me. He's 3 months younger than me. I was born in August of 1990. He was born in November. Really dissing myself by calling Zach Ertz old and washed, but I am too. So anyway, if we go ahead and look at Zach Ertz, though, been in the NFL for forever. He's been in the NFL since 2013. And injuries have just been brutal to him in recent years. 2021, he was able to be relatively healthy that year. But since then, only 10 games played in 2022, 7 games played in 2023. And even some of those seasons where he didn't miss games with the Eagles. Do you remember, you guys, when he had like a lacerated spleen and he played through it? I think that's what it was. It might have even been a kidney. So he has had some incredibly difficult seasons, even when he's played through some injuries. So you got a point now where Zach Ertz is 33. You can't imagine he has very much time left in the league. Why does he want to play for this terrible Cardinals team? He doesn't want to do that. He wants to have a chance to be signed by the Ravens, who that's actually what I think is the best landing spot for Zach Ertz. The Baltimore Ravens. It's a team that was dependent on Mark Andrews in the passing game. He was one of the most targeted tight ends that we have in football. Andrews now out for the season with an ankle injury. Sign Zach Ertz. I think that's the spot he lands. I'm going to predict that for you right now. He ends up going to the Baltimore Ravens. And we've got Don't Move 26 saying he is 34, almost 34. No, he just turned 33. Just turned 33. November 10th, 1990 was his birthday. It's the year 2023. And then, so we've got Don't Move. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. Don't Move to Texas. That is the man's name in the YouTube chat. Says that his birthday is similar to mine. He is in August. His is the 18th. I'm the 23rd. So you are 5 days older than me. So Zach Ertz is washed. I'm a little bit more washed, and you're like the slightest of more washed than me. By about a week, you're more washed than me. Let's see what else we've got going on here for this game. Anybody else like really off the board that I'd be considering? We got Lamb, Prescott. Those are the obvious ones. Tyler Lockett for sure. I think he's viable. There's nobody I'd go to beyond there. It's too big of a projection difference between Jake Ferguson and some of the other players. He's 72 cents, so it's very cheap. But I'd rather pay the extra 15 cents or so as, I'd rather pay the extra 15 cents from Jake Ferguson to get to, Tyler Lockett, or the extra 20 cents to get to a Zach Charbonnet. So that's kind of my cutoff here, is that Jake Ferguson. But let's try to figure out, all right, if we really wanted to go ahead and play Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, what are some of the reasonable ways to differentiate, right? So we're going with that side of the game. Maybe that's where you go down to like Zach Charbonnet and Tyler Lockett. Those are a couple of guys that could differentiate some of those lineups. I do like the way that I've built it, though. We're just kind of stacking more of the Seattle side of the game. I'm a loser till I win the Millie. Any Cooks love? He doesn't project all that great for us. I understand he's an upside, but we've got Zach Charbonnet projected for, where is it? Charbonnet is projected for 13.67 fantasy points. His core floor asking price is less than $1. And then you've got Brandon Cooks. You're getting 3 less fantasy points for the same floor price. There's clearly an upside in Brandon Cooks. We've seen it multiple times this year. But with that said, I'd rather play Zach Charbonnet, same price, and we got him projected for like 30% more fantasy points. That's the way that I prefer to go. Then we've got Brandon asking, is the Dallas defense on the list? He was able to sell his for pretty high. We don't have them in here just because of the complications with projecting all the individual players, whereas we don't have, because if you know, which I'm sure you guys are, in Reignmakers, the way that we have the defense players, it's not here is the team defense, it's here's each individual player. So we don't really have a way to map that on our projections here. But here's what I'll do. I'll pull up our other projections. Go to the showdown single game. And from here, we can just look up what the projection we have here is on the Dallas defense. It's not as good as some of the other players we were just looking at, right? So the Dallas defense, let's see, where is it? Dallas defense. Yeah, 8.87 fantasy points we have on the Dallas defense. Whereas you compare that to what we were just looking at from, like Charbonnet, for instance, was projected for nearly twice as many fantasy points. And then it's also hard to reasonably get an upside out of a defense. I know that we've seen the Dallas defense have a number of defensive touchdowns this year, but to me, that's not something that's like super predictable that I really want to bank on. So I'd rather play the skill position players in this particular game, especially because I think the Cowboys defense is going to be one that people want to play. Right? People usually like getting to the Dallas Cowboys defense, and we often see them be more popular in some of these showdown type contests as compared to some of the main slate contests. And we got Brandon asking, could go over the main slate at some point too. Absolutely. We can do that right now. I feel like I've kind of run my course here talking about Thursday night football, but I figure that is what's most on people's minds. So I wanted to start with that. But yeah, let's go ahead and look at the main slate. And something else, as you guys, if you watch this show, I usually like to do is I start by going to our top stacks page and look to see which individual teams are projected to score the most fantasy points. And from there, we could try to find which players we might want to target. So if you're a stochastic sub, this is a premium tool. The Reignmakers projections are free, so you guys could look at that whenever you want. Let's go to the NFL top stacks. Let's see what we have in here. Top stacks for DraftKings. So what this is telling us is each team's odds of being the top scoring team from a DraftKings fantasy point purpose for the main slate. So we've got Miami, Washington in here. Still some salary and stuff that needs to be updated. Let me make sure. That game is on the main slate, right? I'm pretty sure it is. We've got main slate games. Chargers, New England, Detroit, New Orleans, Atlanta, and the Jets. Arizona, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Tennessee, Miami, Washington, Denver, Houston, Carolina, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Philly, Cleveland, and the Rams. So here's where we're starting. This should come as no surprise, but we have the Dolphins with a 24.3% chance to be the highest scoring team from a DraftKings fantasy perspective on Sunday. One of the highest marks I've seen of the entire year, especially on a slate where there's 10 teams playing. But the Washington Commanders defense was already terrible this year. They made trades at the deadline to move off guys like Montez Sweat and also traded away Chase Young. So the defense has only gotten worse since then. We've seen the Commanders in some pretty easy matchups as of late. This is not one of them. The Dolphins could hang a massive number on the board against them. So let's go ahead and sort by the Dolphins and see which some of the players are that we want to be getting to here. Sort by projection. We got a question in here from Don't Move to Texas saying Dallas is the third most sacks versus shotgun, and Seattle runs most of their plays from shotgun. I think Geno's going to get sacked. And by the way, I totally agree with you, right? I don't think this is the best matchup in the world for Seattle. The question, though, is are the Dallas Cowboys likely to be one of the 4 highest scoring players of every player in the game? And I'm going to say no to that. Can I be wrong? Absolutely. But we've seen big games out of the Dallas Cowboys defense. I just don't think it's the most likely scenario. And we don't have to worry about salary in Reignmakers, right? We could play anybody. So you don't just need Dallas to have a good game. You need them to outscore Geno Smith, CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, TK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, etc. The only way for them to be optimal is they have to outscore all those players, and that's where I just don't think it's all that likely. So I prefer to not play them for this week. There's some other ones where I think you could do some interesting things with defenses in showdown for Reignmakers. This one isn't the week for me because I think people actually get to the Cowboys, so it's not the best way to differentiate a lineup. Just my opinion. Let's look at some of the players that we have for Sunday. And, you know, we've gotten to a point of the year where the core floor prices have come down, which makes sense, right? There's only a few weeks left in the regular season. Then we've got the playoffs. One thing I do like to do here, though, is start to look at teams. Now that we are more than halfway through the season, we have a good feel for which teams are going to be in the playoffs. So I do think there's a little bit of an added benefit to building our rosters and potentially buying players. They're going to be playing into the playoffs because we know there's going to be Reignmakers playoff contests. And, you know, if we go back and look at some of the teams with the best overall top stack odds, Miami's going to be in the playoffs. Philly's going to be in the playoffs. But the Chargers here, we have with an 8.2% chance to be the highest scoring team on the slate, probably not going to be in the playoffs. So their players don't have quite as much value as some players from other teams that we're going to be getting more games out of. A little thirsty. Throat was dry. Had to quench my thirst there, or else I'll start dying on stream here. All right, anyway, back to the Dolphins. So we look at the Dolphins here. We've got Tyreek Hill projected for 24 fantasy points. He does have the superstar status, but I think this is a very good use of the superstar spot this week. We also got Raheem Mostert is now a superstar. It is very difficult to consider Mostert We've got Achane back. We've got Tyreek Hill as a superstar. Most are only projected for 10.97 fantasy points for us. Achane here with 10.1. So I think most are pretty unplayable now that he's the superstar. This has to be the best stack of the week. Has to be. Tyreek Hill to Tua. Tyreek Hill is my overall favorite superstar to play in contest this week. And then you can do double stacks too. We've got Jalen Waddle project for 16.69 fantasy points without the superstar tag. That's pretty appealing. Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Play them all in the same lineup in Reignmakers. I really like that for correlation. And if we go ahead and look at all of the wide receivers, I'll take the tag off of Miami here, and we'll just go to wide receiver. All right, let's sort by wide receiver projection. Don't move to Texas. Do I think Reek gets to 2K this year? If he stays healthy, yes. Is he going to stay healthy? It's hard to say. We've seen him banged up a couple of times this year. He's played through it. It's always a little bit dicey to say, like, I say for certain that a player is going to be healthy. I think he's more likely to do it than not, especially because we kind of know how the Dolphins operate. In my guess, I think Mike McDaniel is the kind of guy who, if it's close at the end of the season, they will kind of drop some plays and prioritize getting Tyreek Hill to that milestone. My official prediction is yes. We see 2,000 receiving yards from Tyreek Hill. All right. Look at these wide receivers. Tyreek Hill project for 24.1. He has the superstar status. Keenan Allen, 19.03. No superstar status. So good target here in Keenan Allen. But the thing that I was saying before, we don't have quite as much value out of him the rest of the season because the Chargers are not going to be a playoff team. A.J. Brown, really good value. Core floor price, 449. We've got Keenan Allen, 496. I don't mind playing A.J. Brown this week either. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I can't prioritize him with the superstar status over Tyreek Hill with the superstar status. Michael Pittman, decent option at 17.75. Cooper Kupp with a superstar status. Kupp has just looked off as of late. I don't know if he's not healthy or if it's something else going on. It's probably the health. We saw him leave 2 weeks ago with an ankle injury. So I think Cooper Kupp, another guy, kind of hard to prioritize. And then we get Jalen Waddle here. Core floor price of only $2.70. Project for 16.69 fantasy points. So I think Jalen Waddle is somebody who, not even just for the purposes of stacking, I think overall in the context of this slate for Reignmakers, Tua, Jalen Waddle, and then as well as Tyreek Hill, that's a really good stack that you could get there. And it's one that obviously has immense upside. We've seen the kind of damage the Dolphins offense do. They've scored as many as 70 points this year, and the Commanders defense is terrible. Don't move to Texas. Some more questions in the chat. You got to have him for the MVP if he does it right. It's still hard, right? Because quarterbacks are so much more valuable than wide receivers. If Tyreek Hill gets to 2,000 receiving yards, I definitely think he wins Offensive Player of the Year. But MVP, I would say it's possible, but still not all that likely because what benefits which teams more? Are the Eagles better? Or I should say this. Does Tyreek Hill have more of a positive impact on the Dolphins than players like Jalen Hurts has on the Eagles and Patrick Mahomes has on the Chiefs? It's not to say Tyreek Hill is invaluable. He is. But if the Dolphins lose Tyreek Hill, they don't drop off as much as the Chiefs do if they lose Patrick Mahomes. They don't drop off as much as the Eagles do if they lose Jalen Hurts. That's why it's just hard for wide receivers to win MVP because we kind of recognize what the positional value is of the players in 2023. I think in the 70s, a kicker won MVP. I don't even know how that happened. The dude didn't even he missed like a handful of field goals that year as well. There's just a massive difference in how you value individual positions and their value in today's game in the NFL compared to how we used to in the past. It's possible, especially because if we see, maybe the Eagles struggle down the stretch, the Chiefs, maybe they struggle down the stretch, and then there's just no obvious quarterback to give the award to. Maybe then Tyreek Hill sneaks in. I don't think it's all that likely, though. We shall see. But anyway, yeah, I like really heavily prioritizing the Dolphins offense for this weekend slate. Then we've got the Eagles here. I think the Eagles are going to be a little bit harder to get to because I don't like burning my superstar spot on a quarterback. And if you're not burning your superstar spot on a quarterback, well, Jalen Hurts is a superstar. How do you really go about stacking the Eagles, right? So we'll pull them up here. Jalen Hurts, superstar status, project for 21.62 fantasy points. That's like almost the exact same that Tua was projected for, and you don't have to burn your superstar spot on Tua. So it's going to be hard for me to get to Jalen Hurts. I do like getting to A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith's kind of an interesting one. We haven't seen much of a ceiling this year out of Devontae Smith, but it's still there. I think there's a ceiling in Devontae Smith, and his core floor price is only $1.39. So if you're looking to get somebody now for super cheap, that I think his price could go up by the time we get to the playoffs, and then especially if the Eagles make a playoff run, and let's say they make the Super Bowl, well, then you're going to have a situation where Devontae Smith could be, he could be a $4 or $5 card for the Super Bowl. You bought him now for $1 and you get utility out of him for the rest of the season. So Devontae Smith is probably my favorite player to buy right now from the Eagles. A.J. Brown, the most playable as an individual player for this week, but not somebody I would necessarily be prioritizing buying on the secondary market for around $5. Other teams here, we got the Houston Texans, the Chargers. Those are other ones that project pretty well in our top stacks tool. Only a few minutes left. If you guys have any questions for me, throw them into YouTube chat. If not, let's just do an overview position by position for the main slate and see what's kind of standing out. And we're looking at the broader picture and not necessarily just the individual teams I like. All right, position. Let's go to quarterback. And I just don't know how we target anybody over Tua this week. Jalen Hurts projects as the second best quarterback for us this week, but he still projects about a half fantasy points less than Tua, and he has the superstar status where Tua doesn't. In addition to that, Tua has a lower core floor price. Everything points towards Tua being the better option. I think you make a case for CJ Stroud here. We've seen some massive passing games out of Stroud, but still, we project Tua better this week, and Tua has a cheaper price point. So I lean towards Tua. Then you got Justin Herbert, but Herbert has the superstar status. That's going to be a no for me. And there's just a big drop-off once you get to Brock Purdy at 17.72. So pretty clear that Tua is the guy to look at here. Running backs for the main slate. Running backs on the main slate, Christian McCaffrey. Somebody else, if you want to burn your superstar, I shouldn't say burn because we want to use it. So if you want to use your superstar spot on Christian McCaffrey, I have no issues with that. My preference is Tyreek Hill, but still McCaffrey, pretty solid option here, project for 23.72 fantasy points. Our highest overall projected running back on the slate. Some other guys I think we could look at here, Rachaad White. Rachaad White is only at a core floor price of $260 and project for 19 fantasy points. Great match for him against the Carolina Panthers. Panthers certainly in flux. And then another thing too, when it comes to this spot with Rachaad White is they play him a ton in the games where he's out there. He's involved in the run game, involved in the passing game. He plays a ton of snaps. So Rachaad White, I think, is one of the best players to go out and buy and plug into lineups with a core floor price of $260. We've seen an increase in price here on Zach Moss. Let's see what ends up happening with Jonathan Taylor. I don't know long-term what his status is going to be, but I would be somewhat surprised if Jonathan Taylor ends up playing again this year. I just don't know why that would be the case. So Zach Moss, somebody who I do think has some long-term value, but there's some risk if Jonathan Taylor ends up coming back. But Moss is our third highest projected running back this week. And then Austin Eckler is somebody else too that stands out. My favorite way to get exposure to the Chargers against New England is going to be through Austin Eckler. Eckler no longer has the superstar status. We have him projected for 17.37 fantasy points, and his core floor price is down to $3.20. Wide receivers, we looked at them already, but we'll do one little final overview of the wide receivers before I sign off here. And if you guys haven't done it yet, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And also tonight, I'm going to be on NBA Live Before Lock. If you guys want more NBA breakdowns from me. And then also there's going to be NFL Live Before Lock. And that is going to be Neil Orfield and Eric Lindquist on that show. So if you guys want any more information on NBA or NFL slates tonight, check out the YouTube channel later on in the day. But our highest projected wide receiver by a pretty wide margin for this week, Tyreek Hill, 24 fantasy points. That's the guy I like the most. That's the guy I want to use my superstar spot on. Then we got Keenan Allen at $4.96 and a $19 core floor price. And then A.J. Brown here. If you're building a lineup that's just the optimal projection lineup, it is Tua. This is based on the stochastic data. So let's see. It would be Tua at quarterback. It would be Rachaad White at running back, wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, wide receiver / tight end, Keenan Allen, and then the flex spot would be A.J. Brown. That's the best lineup we could possibly build with our projections this week. So guys, thank you very much for watching. If you have not done it yet, one more time, like that video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Take the 3 seconds to do it. And it might not even take 3 seconds. If you guys are really quick at clicking, you might be able to do it in 2 seconds. So go ahead and do that. Hope to see you guys later tonight. And good luck with all your lineups and the slate this weekend.